Last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, I introduced our journey into 1 Peter. This last Sunday, I took you through the historical manuscripts to show the basis of how the word elect should appear in verse 1 rather than the opening of verse 2. And there's plenty of grammar to support, not only because I've shown you the manuscripts, but the grammar supports it. First, let me point out where these words will occur, so you'd be familiar with where they occur, and then I'm going to explain them and why the grammar helps us to know Peter was not referring to some heavy theological principles that we can't understand. It's very simple. The first one, as I've pointed out, occurs in your chapter 2. It's chapter 1 and verse 2, elect. That's the first place it occurs. And I'm just going to highlight them. You circle them if you will. I'm just going to call them out, and then we're going to go through them individually as I've broken down the word. The next one occurs in 1 Peter 2 and 4, chapter 2 and verse 4. And if you will, circle the word where inside the verse it says, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen. Circle the word chosen because, in fact, it is the same word as elect. The King James translators had this thing for not using the same word all the time, so as to confuse some of us. And then that very same word that we're looking at, eklektos, will occur again in 1 Peter 2 and verse 6. There it occurs as elect. Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect. Please circle that, elect. The next place it occurs, 1 Peter 2:9. But ye are a chosen, circle that, a chosen generation. And last of all, it occurs in the 5th chapter, in the 13th verse. Please circle 4 words rather, in the 13th verse. Elected together with you. Those 4 words will be one word in the Greek. That's pretty neat, huh? Okay. I've done here an analysis of elect or chosen in 1 Peter, and what we have is I've given you the Greek, eklektos or eklekton, and I've given you the English phonetic, what it is pronounced by. And then I'm going backwards. So at first it is simply to select or to choose. But then I'm traveling backwards. It stems from the word eklegomai. And here you have ek and leg, to make a choice, to choose with words. This word then gets broken down into 2 parts. Ek, from out of, or flowing from, or emanating from, and lego, words or speech. And if you follow that through, you eventually get to logos, and logos actually, if you're a Strong's person, comes from lego. And if you remember, Dr. Scott taught on leg and log. And if you look into the Strong's, you will find it's just these subtleties of how God does everything perfectly. That logos comes out of lego, which is, if lego is the spoken word and Christ is the logos, then the spoken word was first, God spoke, and then the word in the flesh came. It's just these things that are carried through so perfectly between leg and logos, but lego and logos. But so the breaking down of this word, so you can see, has as at its root to choose out with words if you follow the word backwards. And so the first example that I've given you is, obviously, as I pointed out, elect of verse 2 should read and be in verse 1, and it should follow after Jesus Christ. And it is an adjective. I want you to put this down somewhere, that this first thing that we've identified, the elect of verse 2, which should be in verse 1 and should come immediately after Jesus Christ, elect, if you will, just as the King James reads to the strangers. You make your own corrections, because I've already made the corrections and told you what it should read. But I want you to note that it is an adjective. It is in the dative, it's masculine and plural. Now, why I'm going to make an issue out of this is because when you have an adjective in the Greek, whatever it is describing, you know, in English we have adjectives. It can be blue, describing a boy is blue. I don't know if a boy is blue, but the color blue would be an adjective describing someone's shirt. The adjective in the Greek must agree with whatever it is describing, both in case and in its gender and in the number of people. So the reason why I highlighted this at the very beginning of the lesson is that the eklektois as an adjective is agreeing and is describing the periepidemos, those people among who are living amongst the populace, which is being translated strangers. It's describing those people and agreeing with it. Let's stick to King James for a minute. Elect and strangers agree grammatically together. They're both adjectives. Well, one is an adjective. Elect is an adjective. The strangers actually is pronominal. So it's an adjective and it's pronominal. It's also describing something, but it's taking the place of a noun. It's like a substitute teacher. It's not quite the real teacher, but it's sitting in place for. That's what pronominal means. It's sitting in place of a noun. So they agree. They are dative, masculine, and plural, the both of them. Eklektois and the strangers. They agree together. If you move the elect into verse 2, it has nothing to agree with in verse 2. You see, immediately, according to the foreknowledge of God, according to the foreknowledge will be in the accusative. And the elect is in the dative. They don't agree. I hope this makes sense to you, because parts of speech must agree with each other. So just from a grammar standpoint, if elect was in the accusative, which it is not, but if it was, it would be in agreement with according to the foreknowledge of God. But it is not. It's in the dative. Now, I pray I don't lose this. Electois. All right? And I'm going to give you the code that we morphologically tag it with. And it looks like that. That telling you that this is an adjective. It's in the dative case. It's masculine and plural. And it agrees with this word, periepidemos, which is an adjective. It is also pronominal. It's pretending to be a noun. It's in the dative. It's masculine. And it's plural. They agree together. So we're using the terminology that everybody understands. They agree together. Now, these are both in the dative case. Remember our box, the grammar box. We had accusative, dative, and genitive. In the accusative, the motion is going into or pointing, as I've said. Dative, it is in, under. And genitive, it is flowing, the motion is flowing away from. So it makes perfect sense that these people who are being described as select, elect, or chosen, describing this populace of people. And in fact, the next word that follows is the Greek word. I'll write it in the English, is the diaspora word, which is actually in the genitive. So it's telling you that these people that came out of, remember they are dispersed people coming out of a place. So we're describing people in the dative who are in or under. In the realm of the grammar, it makes it perfectly clear you couldn't put the word elect beside according to the foreknowledge of God because it wouldn't be in agreement. I hope everybody's clear on this because it sets the stage for the rest of the lesson. What you have is the precision to know when you look at a sentence and you're familiar with the grammar, to know where a word belongs, what, for example, when we look at an adverb. An adverb is modifying a verb, and it can be modifying the person or the action depending on how the declension is put together. Oh, she's doing grammar. Yes. So let's go to the next example. I gave you the second one. Let's see if I can go back to the previous page. So we've covered the first one. Let's go to the second one. Second one occurs in 1 Peter 2:4. And here's the funny thing. In the second chapter, we're going to encounter this word 3 times, but the case will help us when we finally, there's only 5 of these, by the way, so don't go, oh God, how many are there? There's too many. There's only 5, and they'll help sort out the whole essence of the word real quick. These 5. So, in verse 4, this is somewhat misleading in the English. Let's start at the beginning of the chapter. Wherefore, laying aside all malice and all guile and all hypocrisies and envies and all evil speakings, as newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby, if so be ye have tasted that the Lord is gracious. To whom coming, and watch all the italics here, as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. Now, here's where this gets a little fun. Let's see if just happen to have my other Greek book here. I'll have both open. 2:4. Okay. So, this particular one, I'm highlighting 2 things for you. Chosen and precious. Chosen is the word I'm going after, but I'm highlighting precious for a reason. In the Greek reading, there is no separation between chosen and precious. They actually sit as words side by side. And I like that because when you see the words in the Greek, and by the way, chosen is the same word as elect. You see it right here, eklekton. Here we go again. It's being used again as an adjective in the accusative, masculine, and singular. That's what it appears like. And chosen and precious are not only side by side, but they're both the same. They're both adjective, accusative, masculine, and singular. Now, the reason why I highlight this is because these 2 adjectives that agree together are describing the stone, singular, which is referring to Jesus. That's why I said the text is a little bit hard to read. When you read it, you can read the full essence, and you know in the singular it is referring to the stone the builders rejected. But the King James had a marvelous way of making things sound like it might be referring to something else perhaps. It's referring to Jesus. This is the beautiful thing. Here it's in the accusative. I want you to see the adjective appearing in the accusative, and the beauty of Peter's writing here. Obviously, thank goodness, it says that this adjective in the accusative is a male and singular. So at least we know Jesus is male and singular. But let's go back to a blank page, hopefully. We'll just start anew. All right. We're looking right now at the text of 1 Peter and 2:4. And here the word is eklekton. And it is an adjective. We put 2 dashes there. If we were fully defining, there may be other letters, but it's just an adjective. It's in the accusative case, masculine and singular. And precious, by the way, the word that appears as precious, agrees with this word as well, and both these adjectives are describing the stone, or I'll put it in Greek, the lithon, which is referring to Jesus. Now, I'm highlighting this for a reason. If we reread the text, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God, you're going to see that immediately following the way the English does is they separate chosen and precious. And the Greek has chosen and precious side by side, but does something really interesting, which is, but with God. Oh, we got to get the other book out, which has all the grammar goodies in it. If you have enough books open, something will happen. All right. The words that come before the elect and precious are of God. It is not genitive, it's a dative. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is go back to the grammar box again. As an adjective, we have in the accusative, it is motion moving toward in a direction. So when it says chosen of God, there's something very significant about all of these different cases using the same word. You see, chosen in the dative, referring to the first example I gave you, was an adjective describing a people in a chosen state. Picture the container being chosen. Versus God saying, I'm choosing this my son, if you will. I'm choosing him. Versus where we'll find again it's going to appear in a different case. And this will help us to finally figure out why when people talk about the elect, they're mistaken about what it means. You see, God can choose like he did with Jesus. Let me show you the clarity of the next verse. Will clarify in great detail, and you'll understand why I'm saying when God does the choosing specifically and deliberately, it will be in the accusative case as it is going to be said here. Let's go back to the text. Okay, let's look at the next example, and you'll see why I say it makes sense, and I hope you'll understand why the grammar sorts out what this word means. The next example is actually a quote out of many different places. Wherefore also it is contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious. See, the King James, they didn't like to repeat things over and over again, but that's the way it should have read in the previous verse I've just highlighted, the same way, but they had to change it. Elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. A quote out of Isaiah. And I want you to think about this. It says, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect and precious, and him that believeth on him, him that faitheth on him, shall not be ashamed. Literally, it should say, it should read properly. This particular word, elect, in verse 6, we have another eklekton word of verse 6. And you can see the first time they use elect, the second time they use chosen. Now we're back to elect. It's the same word, by the way. We just can't, it's like women, can't seem to make up your mind. And we have again adjectives, both eklekton and precious side by side, which are both adjectives. We have them in the accusative case, masculine and singular, again describing the stone. So it is just a repeat again, but this time you can really get the clarity. We're not confused. We're speaking of Jesus. Now, if you are following this, you get down to verse 9, and you're going to read where it says, but ye are a chosen generation. The same word, eklekton, but here we have it as an adjective, nominative, neutral, and singular. And there's a reason why the grammar puts this in this order. Adjective is describing the generation, and nominative makes this chosen of this generation the subject. Neutral because it applies to men and women, and it's singular, referring to this particular age that he was addressing. So I'm going to go back to draw the famous grammar box again. Just do the box. Accusative, accusative, dative, and genitive. Now, the motion of genitive going out of or away from. Dative, it's either inside this box, it can be here, or either under the box. But generally, dative is referring to what is considered inside. And accusative, the motion is flowing towards or into. Now, if you look at these words that we've highlighted, you're going to find something kind of interesting. Somewhere I had a master list here. There we go. The elect that is in our first chapter, which should be in verse 1, dative, is describing as an adjective a chosen people living in or among, nestled among those people which are being described, a populace living alongside the populace of the diaspora. In the second example, we have the elect, verse 2:4. 2:4 and 2:6 are referring to Jesus, are in the accusative. So when we read the text, to whom coming as unto a living stone, King James, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. Wherefore it is also contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded, is speaking of Jesus, who, imagine God the Father, and I don't want to get into my trying to split and define the Trinity, but imagine God the Father speaking through the voice of the prophet Isaiah, saying, behold, behold, I lay this cornerstone, pointing to his son Jesus. Versus these other examples, at least ye are a chosen generation. And the nominative I haven't put here because it's the subject of the sentence. So you can see the dative is describing a people living amongst other people from verse 1, as I've put it there. And verses 2 and 4 are pointing towards Jesus. And the defining between how God, when God is choosing and speaking to a specific chosen vessel, he is going to be pointing, the accusative will lift the people who are being selected. Now, if this sounds a little convoluted or a little rough, I'm going to repeat it again. It's worth repeating, because once you crystallize the grammar, you begin to see that what Peter was simply saying in verse 1, he was describing the people nestled among a people, if you want to call them chosen, nestled among and living among, like I could say, here is John and Mary, who are, I'm writing and sending them a letter through the mail. They are residents of Glendale. My chosen residents of Glendale, or Los Angeles, or wherever you are. Versus, which is in the dative, you live in this city, therefore. Versus the accusative, which God, I reluctantly make this analogy, but it's as God the Father speaking through the prophet Isaiah, or the Spirit speaking through the prophet, pointing to his Son, puts the word in the accusative, selecting out his Son by saying in the accusative, I selected him specifically. If you begin to see the distinction in the cases, you begin to see that the subtleties do not permit that first elect of King James verse 2, to be doctrinal. Yes, we're indeed all a chosen people, called and chosen. But if you understand what an adjective is, it is describing a people, adding the color, adding some dimension, describing some quality, if you will. And we can say this is a quality, but it is not an exclusivity. So the relevance to defining these words becomes paramount. Now, I left off chapter 5 and verse 13 because that's pretty complicated. Elect together with you, and you'll see the you is italicized, but elect together with you. I said circle that whole deal because it's one word. Oh, let's see if we can go back. So here we have 1 Peter 5:13, elected together with you, and it is a compound. So soon, which in the Greek is always signifying with. We get our words for like symphony, the together words, soon, with. And here you have your word ek and lekte. And here you can see simply it's giving you the feminine and singular with this ending. And it's a subject. I'll tell you why this one is complicated. It's not complicated if you want to read the grammar, but you see, if you read in this verse, the church that is italicized, yeah? Because in the Greek, there is no church that is. It simply reads with one letter. It looks like an N. The one letter is a feminine word to say she, referring to the church. And the King James translators obviously did not like Peter referring to the church as a she. If she be to him, right? So they italicized that. But when we get there to the end of the book, you'll see it is she. So that's why this adjective is actually in the feminine. Because you'd say, well, what is it modifying or what is it describing? It's describing she as in the church, and that's why they italicized it. When we get there, we'll have a lot of fun through this book. Now, I took the time to do this here to show the difference between, let me draw a line right here. There are 5 examples of the eklektoi word, but there are 6 examples of another word which can be quite confusing as you read through the book. You're going to find the words chosen and called look like they're intermingled. They are, but they're 2 different groups of words. So I've just kind of tacked these at the bottom to show these are different words. They're all verbs from a different stem. For calling and choosing are 2 different words. Now, I hope the point of this will give a summation of something. I'm going to take us back now that I've given you this foundation. I'm going to take you back, and we're going to look together at why elect in verse 2 can't fit there. Now I've just described to you that elect must agree with the strangers, as the King James reads, but I'm going to show you grammatically what the problem of fitting it in according to the foreknowledge, what the problem is in the grammar. So verse 2, as I have taken it and translated it, would end technically with Bithynia, which is right here. And then we would have verse 2 beginning right here with kata, according. Did I say that? Yes. And they don't, do they do this? Yes, they do. According. And here we have the foreknowledge of God. Now, I've put verse 1, which is Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. Here, 2, because it is dative, 2. to elect. I want you to notice there are, in the Greek at least, I'll pull up one of the Greek texts eventually to show you, there are no definite articles, and in 3 verses, or 2 complete verses rather, there's only going to be 1 verb. So, to elect ones, I'm going to supply a word. And we're going to use the King James strangers, even though I don't like that. It's not a good translation, but to simplify, because it is plural. And this being of the diaspora. There is no definite article here. There is no definite article here. There is no definite article here. But this is what verse 1 would look like. So Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to, and I've supplied the word elect ones, I've supplied that to give the concept that it is plural, strangers of diaspora. There's not even a the in there. But you can see this word, elect, as I've pointed out, is an adjective describing strangers, those living among the people. And it is, as you can see, it is in perfect agreement. They agree with each other. That's what must happen. So we're finding out that these people, the description of these people is being given by the adjective. We have another description and this pretend noun, so it's pronominal, an adjective pronominal. And the source of these people, because this is in the genitive, the source of these people being given from this word, supplied by diaspora in the genitive. Verse 2, if it ended in our King James with Asia and Bithynia, according to the foreknowledge of God, I want you to look at something really interesting. The places end, and all the places being listed are in the genitive, suggesting where the people came out of. And then according to is in the accusative. And I plan to really have a good time with this. The source, of course, is God, God the Father, in the genitive. But according to foreknowledge is in the accusative. Remember what I said to you about the accusative just a second ago? It's pointing the finger. So imagine the foreknowledge of God is God entering, pardon the pun, but it's God entering his hand into the stream of time, although it's his knowledge that we're speaking of. But he's entering his hand into the stream of time according to the foreknowledge. If you get the color of the grammar, it helps you to understand and to kind of demystify the way the sentence reads. So you could not put this word in front of this word. You could not put elect, eklektois, grammatically in front of this word, because it would need, as an adjective, it would need to be modifying something or describing something that's coming after, and nothing would be in agreement with it. So, everybody talks about how Erasmus was a brilliant linguist and had a great mastery of the Greek language. Greek and Latin, obviously. And I don't doubt that. I can't go and ask him right now. I'm sure he's probably busy. But it's safe to say he had a great mastery. So it becomes a puzzle to me. I've already showed you in the manuscripts, he's the culprit that moved it. The question begins with why. To the English eye, remember, he wasn't writing in English. He was writing in Latin. But to the English eye, as we read, there's no harm done to the text, because we're not, when we read our Bible, King James, NIV, NLT, NCV, whatever it is you're reading, we're not reading grammar. We're just reading English. I hate to say it like that, but we tend to not dissect our own language. But the Greek forces us to examine this, to show not only why the elect cannot sit where it's been placed, but you can see as an English reader how if you had no Greek foundation, you would be reading elect according to, and I'm not suggesting that people aren't chosen according to God's reaching his hand into time, because that's the way people are chosen. God reaches his hand into time, and he crosses the barrier of time and eternity and reaches in, and he does whatever he wills. We still have a free will and the option to make plenty of blunders. Trust me, I'm the poster child for that. But my point is, if we're simply talking about theology now, not grammar, theologically speaking, it can't even sit there. Because the chosen ones, the elect ones, although God did the choosing, the grammar is still telling me, when I get down to the nubbin of this here, that all of this was in the accusative. God reaching his hand in the accusative, as I've shown you through the grammar box. Do it again. In the accusative right here, which is those motions. See, the wonderful thing about the accusative is it is moving towards something. And in this case, I'm looking at God, I've used the finger of pointing at something. I'm looking at God reaching his hand into the box of time that we call time through the eternities to arrange or prepare or to reroute or whatever it is he's going to do. According to, by those means, stemming from him, of course, we go on to read of God the Father. That genesis of the foreknowledge doesn't come from some magical cloud. It emanates from him. The grammar lets us know that. But simply just as a foundational principle, you can see these words belong together. They are inseparable in their structure. This adjective is in agreement with this adjective that is pronominal. And if I were to make it less complicated, I'd say this word here for strangers is, like I said, it's a substitute noun. It's not quite a full-orbed noun, and it's describing a little bit of itself. It's playing a dual role. It's a Jekyll and Hyde type thing. But it's an adjective, and it's sitting in for a noun. But you can see dative, masculine, and plural. Dative, masculine, and plural. They agree with one another, and they must sit side by side in the sentence. So if anybody tells you, okay, well, she showed me the manuscripts. Some people say, show me the money. I say, show the manuscripts. I've showed you the manuscripts, and I've showed you the grammar. I want to make abundantly sure that when I make corrections and show you, I've not only backed it up with the manuscripts, but I've also backed it up with the grammar that goes alongside of it. So we're not making adjustments according to some willy-nilly decision. This is rock-solid stuff here.